Now, I did mention that in Go, you don't have different kinds of loops, instead you only have the for loop. But I did also mention that it would be quite flexible. And it is. Because you can define a condition like this if you know that you want to execute a loop a certain amount of times. But if you need an infinite loop, if you want to keep that application running forever, you can simply get rid of all that code and define the loop like this. Now all the code in there will keep on executing and executing and executing. And I'll show you how to get out of the application soon. For the moment, I'll just outsource this here and move that out of the loop because I don't always want to welcome the user again. I only want to do this once in this application, and it's just this code and all the if code that should keep on running. But with that, if we save this, if we run this application, indeed, we can now make our choices and the application keeps on running, even if we choose exit at the moment. So therefore, at the moment, if you do want to exit, you have to force close the application by pressing Ctrl+C in your command line. But that's of course not how we want to exit it. A better way of exiting it would be to go to that else block and return here. Because return will go back out of the function in which you are, so out of the main function, and since this is the main function that runs the program, this will also close the program here. So that's one way of exiting. With that, if we run this again, we can choose all these options, but if we choose for, we can see goodbye here, and indeed, the program exited thereafter. Now that's one way, but maybe you don't want to return from the function. Let's say we also have another output here outside of that loop, just as we output the welcome message here outside of the loop, where we want to say, thanks for choosing our bank. Now, of course, we could put this into this else branch, but for demo purposes, I'll keep it outside there. Now, as you see, it's grayed out and I got a warning here. Because indeed, Go and my IDE understands that this code is unreachable. It will never be executed. Because we have an infinite loop in front of that code. And the only ways of getting out of that loop are to get out of the function. So this can never execute. And that might not be what we want. Therefore, instead of returning here, we can use another special keyword which can only be used if you're inside of a for loop. And that's the break keyword. This, you could say, breaks out of the loop. It makes sure that the loop is ended, and therefore then the next code outside of the loop would be executed. And therefore with break added here, if we again run this application, and we choose for, you see we get this thanks for choosing our bank message, and then the program exits again, because we got out of the loop. Now just as we have break for getting out of a loop, we also have another keyword that can only be used inside of a loop. And that would be the continue keyword. Now to understand it, let's go to these nested if checks here. Here we currently return if the user enters an invalid amount. Now that's a bit harsh because that means that at the moment, if I choose an invalid amount, the application closes. It would of course be nicer if we would get another try. So if the application would continue running and we could simply make the same choices again. Therefore, instead of using return here, we could of course try break, but that would get us out of the loop and essentially achieve the same result as return, therefore. Instead, it's this continue keyword I mentioned, which simply tells Go to skip the rest of the current loop iteration and continue with the next. So this code here won't be executed if you call continue here, but it will restart with the first line inside of the loop thereafter. And that's exactly what I want here. So with continue added here, if we now run this and we try to deposit an invalid amount, we can make choices again. And we can, for example, choose to deposit a valid amount. And that's therefore another pretty important keyword, which, just like break, can sometimes be exactly what you need when working with loops.